Chicago, January 17th, 1920, 0001. The clock had just struck midnight. Seconds before, the United States of America was a country where a man could order a glass of beer. After midnight, he couldn't. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution had taken effect. The manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcohol became a federal crime across every state, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Journalists called it the noble experiment. Reformers wept with joy. Pastors delivered sermons about a new dawn of morality. Not one of them understood what they had just created. On paper, the logic was sound. Alcohol destroyed families. Factory workers drank their wages. Wives waited until morning. Children arrived at school hungry. The temperance movement had spent decades collecting signatures, organizing marches, persuading legislators. The First World War delivered the final argument. Grain was needed for soldiers' bread, not for beer. Congress voted. The president signed. And then it began. The first problem was mathematical. The federal government allocated a budget and a force of agents to enforce prohibition that was catastrophically insufficient. Across a country of more than 100 million people, there were roughly 1,500 dry agents, as they were called, 1,500 men against an entire nation that wanted to drink. Thousands of miles of borders, rivers, lakes, coastlines, private cellars, barns, warehouses, hospitals, an endless geography of vice. The smugglers understood this almost immediately. Canada had not banned alcohol, neither had Mexico. The Caribbean islands remained a sea of rum in the most literal sense. Along the Canadian border, an entire parallel economy materialized overnight. Trucks with false floors, fishing boats with hulls packed with cases of Scotch whiskey, small airstrips carved into Michigan fields where planes landed without lights, without noise, in the dead of night. Detroit became the gateway. The Detroit River, which separated the American city from Windsor, Ontario, was only a few hundred meters wide in summer. In winter, it froze solid, and cargo sleds crossed it in darkness without making a sound. By some estimates, more than 5,000 bottles of illegal alcohol passed through Detroit every single day in the early years alone. But the real revolution didn't happen at the borders. It happened in basements. Ordinary Americans, farmers, tailors, widows, immigrants began distilling spirits at home. The technology was ancient and not complicated. Grain, sugar, water, a handful of yeast, a copper tube, a bucket of cold water for cooling. The apparatus could be assembled for $20. The earnings exceeded a month's factory wages. The problem was that the moonshine killed people. Not metaphorically, literally. Improperly distilled spirits contain methanol, wood, alcohol, which when consumed first blinded, then destroyed the kidneys and liver, then killed. In 1926, the federal government, in a desperate attempt to render industrial alcohol undrinkable, required manufacturers of denatured spirits to add poisonous substances, including strychnine, benzene, and mercury. The logic was that if people knew industrial alcohol was poisoned, they wouldn't drink it. People drank it anyway, and died by the thousands. By the end of the dry decade, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 Americans had been killed by tainted alcohol, depending on how you count. Some researchers put the number higher. Nobody knows precisely, because nobody was particularly keeping track. While some were dying, others were building empires. Alphonse Capone was born in Brooklyn to a family of Neapolitan immigrants. At 25, he controlled Chicago. More precisely, its underground half. The network of illicit bars, known as speakeasies, stretched across the entire city. In Chicago alone, by the mid-20s, there were estimated to be more than 10,000 such establishments. More than there had been legal bars before the ban. The architecture of the speakeasy was identical across the country, an unremarkable building from the outside. Heavy doors, a peephole, a password. Inside, smoke, jazz, dancing, illegal gin at twice the price of legal beer before 1920. Customers paid. Police officers came too, but not to make arrests. They came for the envelope. Corruption bloomed like a flower in a warm climate. In Chicago, by various estimates, more than half the police department was on bootleggers' payrolls. Judges released the arrested for cash. City mayors looked the other way in exchange for campaign financing. The system, designed to destroy vice, had become part of it. But the most fascinating story isn't about criminals or corrupt officials. The most fascinating story is about ordinary people. American women in the 20s did something nobody had anticipated. They went to speakeasies in enormous numbers. Before Prohibition, bars had been almost exclusively male territory. The dry law shattered that. An underground bar couldn't afford to be selective about its clientele. Anyone who knew the password was welcome. Women smoked, drank, danced the Charleston in short skirts. They didn't look the way respectable women were supposed to look. They looked free. The word flapper entered the language precisely then. A new generation of women who refused corsets and convention. The prohibition designed to make America more moral had paradoxically accelerated a social revolution nobody had planned for. Meanwhile, in the countryside, something quieter was happening. Rural families who had farmed corn for generations discovered that fermented corn was worth 10 times more than raw corn. Entire counties in Kentucky and Tennessee became vast, invisible distilleries hidden in hollows and behind barn walls. The moonshiner, who had once been a marginal figure in Appalachian folklore, became, almost overnight, a central figure in the American economy. Delivery routes spread from these mountain hollows down to cities. Young men drove modified automobiles, engines souped up, suspensions reinforced to carry heavy loads. Along back roads, at speeds that terrified local sheriffs, these drivers became extraordinarily skilled at evading pursuit. After Prohibition ended, many of them kept racing. Some say this is how stock car racing was born. November 18, 1933. Early morning. Franklin Roosevelt signed the document repealing the 18th Amendment. That same day, taps opened in breweries across the country. Trucks carrying legal beer rolled into the streets. Crowds lined the sidewalks and cheered. The Noble experiment had lasted 13 years. It did not reduce alcohol consumption. It remained roughly at the same level as before the ban, only it moved underground. It did not strengthen families. It did not make the streets safer. On the contrary, organized crime surged sharply after 1920 and did not return to previous levels for decades. What Prohibition did instead was something else entirely. It taught millions of Americans to disrespect the law. It demonstrated that the state could be wrong, systematically and at scale. It gave birth to jazz clubs and flappers, to organized crime and crooked policemen, to poisoned spirits and underground bars, and it left in American culture a deep mark that has never fully faded. A distrust of government bans, a romanticization of the rule breaker, and the firm conviction that human thirst, literal and metaphorical, will always find its way through, even through the wall of the law.